Hey everyone, Bruce Eckfeldt here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Make sure that you subscribe and turn on notifications so we can let you know when the next video is posted. You can also check us out at eckfeldt.com for more great content. With that, let's go check out the video.
You're listening to Thinking Outside the Bud, where we speak with entrepreneurs, investors, thought leaders, researchers, advocates, and policymakers who are finding new and exciting ways for cannabis to positively impact business, society, and culture. And now, here is your host, business coach, Bruce Eckfeldt.
Welcome, everyone. We are here on the next episode of Thinking Outside the Bud. Today, I've got Brandon Gold with me. Brandon, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. It's my pleasure to be here.
And I'm going to put your full bio in the show notes here because it's pretty extensive. But just, you've been in this for, it looks like almost 15 years, maybe over 15 years now.
Yeah,
and
about 17 years.
17 years.
I'm 33 years old, so that gives you kind of like an idea. I've been doing this since I was, I've been doing this since I was 18 years old. In very small capacity, obviously, nothing crazy. Just because at 18, what can you really do?
Yeah, and so then you've been cultivation, Garden State Dispensary, COO of Curaleaf, COO of Dank Research and Development. Currently, you're MedVape, Supply LLC, All Things Vape, Gold Syndicate, and B16 Manufacturing. So it's quite an impressive list, and I think what is exciting for me in terms of having this conversation is really kind of understanding that those two areas, the kind of management operations of grows themselves, like what goes into the complexity, into making sure that you've got a successful grow, a productive grow at scale, and then understanding the business side in terms of investment and bringing in funds, management, governance. So I think we can kind of talk about both of those things, but I think it's a really interesting conversation to see how those things intersect and affect each other. So why don't we start with just the grow side? So I think a lot of people have heard about grows and what goes into a grow, but when we talk about grows today, where are we in terms of technology, scale, size? Like what goes into a sophisticated grow at this point?
It's a multifaceted question. What you have right now is, my family is very heavily involved in finance, right? So you get a lot. It's funny, when I first started growing cannabis, everybody laughed at me and said, "What are you doing? Get your head on straight. You need a real job. Get it together." And I said, I really like, so at that point, I was 18 or 19 years old, and I'm growing cannabis legally in California. But we were growing, in a two-bedroom apartment, turning one of the apartments into a grow, slapping up a compliance sticker that says that we're growing and I'm a patient. And then you kind of had this weird gray area where there were broker dealers and dealing with dispensaries and yada yada. And then there was Prop 215 and SB 420 that came out in California, which allowed you to be a part of a collective and then grow for that collective. So it was kind of the Wild West in the beginning, and we kind of took advantage of it. But it's cannabis, and in California is 10 years ahead of, let's say, California, Oregon, Washington, and Denver are kind of 10 years ahead now of the East Coast, where my main bases of operation are, because I think the East Coast is the next place to pop off. But so when I first started, it was throw up some lights, get some good nutrients and make sure things are good, and the plants will be fine. And that's at a small scale. And quickly, people started to see some of the things that I was doing and wanted some stuff implemented into their larger scale operations in the San Fernando Valley in California. So I got involved with some bigger grows there, just looking at what they were doing and seeing how I could make it more efficient or better. At that time, it was early-ish 2000s, and people could still use Eagle 20, and there was no pesticides or pesticide requirements. There was no testing requirements. And I think that the industry's come a long way, because now that they require all that things, it makes a safer product for the end user. Now let's start to go into like larger scale grow operations. I've done over I don't even know what the last count was. I think it's 115 or 116 large scale grows. That means 50 lights or more,
Okay.
10,000 square feet about. We started getting into extractions, volatile extractions, solventless extractions, and these OSHA compliant extraction facilities as well. And I had to really, learn by the seat of my pants and speak with some of the people I know who are now part of my chemistry section and construction section, things like that of my new business, which is Gold Syndicate and V16 manufacturing. So large scale operation compared to a small scale operation is like, it's like building a robot compared to playing with like something you bought at, Best Buy, a little, robot kit or whatever it is. It's worlds differently. It's the difference between growing, tomatoes in your garden and commag or commercial agriculture, for large scale production.
I mean, in terms of the sources of knowledge, I mean, how much did you kind of learn or borrow or gain from agriculture production versus some of these other industries? I mean, where were your sources of knowledge, or what contributed to kind of the science and capability?
I mean, I'm totally 100% self-taught.
Yeah.
They pressured me to get, some of the operations I was in pressured me to get a horticultural license, not a license, but like a certificate.
Yep.
And that's what they do with a lot of their growers. But essentially what happens is it's like we're at the point of prohibition with alcohol right before alcohol. And I hate to use that reference because I think cannabis is a medicine, not an intoxicant. But it's similar. So you have, these people that kind of know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. You have people that are great, amazing grow talent. You have great, amazing extraction talent. And then you have, all this money going into a license and a facility and all these different things, especially here on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a business, and it becomes, you got to have, your standard operating procedures. You have to have your integrated pest management, or IPMs as the industry calls them, in place. You're reporting to, let's see, like in Jersey, it's the Department of Health. In Connecticut, it's the Department of Consumer Protection. Yep. They audit you. Some are more like your friends and they believe in the answer, and some of them are more like cops and they really don't believe in it. To give an example, when we were in Jersey, our point of contact at the DOH was an ex-state police trooper who absolutely did not believe in cannabis. And his goal was to get us as many citations as he possibly could in his own kind of rogue cop mentality when we're bringing in all this tax money and we're doing all this good for people. And I mean, when I was out in California, I really thought medical cannabis was a way for people to get their medical cannabis card and consume cannabis legally because they liked it. And that's, in my opinion, that's all a valid excuse you need to use cannabis. Yep. I think the body mobilizes it in a certain way and does all these different things. But kind of to reel myself back in, as cannabis ops scale, you have to really, really, really have somebody at boots on the ground that understands two things, which is what I do and where I sell. Essentially, you have to have somebody who knows how these cannabis operations run and how they're supposed to run, and you should be able to tour a room and see if there's any sort of infection or there's any sort of bacterials or there's any sort of anything that's wrong, down to if there's a nitrogen deficiency or if there's a calcium deficiency. You need to have somebody at the board level that understands that and has 10 years behind them. Inversely, you have to have somebody that can communicate with a board of cutthroat private equity people.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like there's only a couple of us in the country that can do that level of, wearing two hats, I guess you could say. But the problems lie how companies are structured.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem right now.
And do you find, I mean, I'm curious if this is, when this becomes a problem, is it in the setup? Is it in the management? Or is it in the kind of the crisis? Like when things are not going as planned, like how do you resolve or all of those? All of those. I mean, I'm curious. We in tech, I come out of the tech space, and there's always been kind of a similar thing, which is a little bit of the translator or the person that can understand the intricacies of the software and the systems and the integration that needs to happen, and the business folks or the kind of executive folks in terms of trying to achieve some kind of business strategy, business goal, and oftentimes what we found is when things aren't going right, it's because the executive side is sort of muddling in the technical side, trying to actually manage the tech piece. And that's often when things go wrong. It sounds like kind of a similar.
So let's talk about a grow that I was involved in let's say the last 5 years, and I'm bound by mutual non-disparagement and a bunch of other things. But so we're not going to name names, but a grow that I've been involved with, I was pretty heavily involved with on the East Coast. What you had a large group of board members who were representing, each one of those people were point people representing private equity money. And it was for an enormous raise that was done years ago to get the license. So licensing for these facilities can be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And that's just to apply. Then there's caveats. You have to have your location where you were going to grow the cannabis and produce the cannabis in place prior to the licensing process. Yeah. So, what you have is you have a board coming in. They're like, all right, we're ready and willing to spend millions of dollars. And on the first, kind of seed, not the seed round, but the first seeding of the company is going to be the licensing and the regulatory and making sure we get our licenses. Mm-hmm. Let's say all that goes great and you get all your licenses and you're ready to go, right? Now you're going to need a capital investment of about $6 to $10 million to get that huge cannabis facility up and running and to do it right. So what will happen is the people who win the licenses, at least as far as I've seen in certain states, and I'm hoping things are going to change in Mass and in Jersey if things get really crazy, but the people that win the licenses, they have written those applications, and I'm guilty of writing some of those applications, where you're putting in best practice. So, a question on an application might read, and it's very vague, it might read something along the lines of, how will New Canaco X deal with an outbreak of powdery mildew in its grow? And then it has an A, B, and C section on what pesticides you're going to use and da-da-da-da-da-da. And it used to be a lot easier. Like if you look at ComAg for USDA organics, cannabis industry people don't have access to even that because it's been ruled out that that's not okay to use when it's fine to use. And I am not a proponent for pesticides. When I see pesticides, I mean garlic oil and rosemary oil. Yeah. But there were some grows that I worked at where if you were going to just, for instance, spray water on the plants, if you're using it in the capacity as a pesticide, it's a pesticide. So it doesn't matter what it is. So it's application, it's not, they deadlock you in, which is not a good thing. Huh. So the biggest thing I could say regarding, the money side of it and the ops side of it is that it's got a failure rate of something like 85 to 90% because you have private equity guys or hedge fund guys or people that are independently wealthy investing in these huge cannabis corporations. And then they're bringing in guys that are growers that they know of or something like that, but there's no background or anything like that, and they cut the mustard for a little bit, and then when a problem happens, then they all freak out and they'll go to some big conglomerate. I'm not going to name names again, but there's about 5 or 6 of them in the United States, a big cannabis conglomerate, and their websites look really pretty and attractive to private equity people. And they're normally run by criminals at the top end, but they're these big conglomerates, and they come in and they look at your grow and they say, no, even if it's right, I've been on the finance side of things, and they said, oh, we're having a second opinion come in alongside with you, where I'll go and I'll give them my rundown on what's wrong with it or what needs to be done. They'll come in and give us a completely separate one, and then they'll lock them into service contracts, and it's kind of like teaching a child that they can just pay their way out of it. And then, but what's really happening is that company's locking them into some sort of insane contract for a service agreement. And it's kind of good.
So they come in and actually manage the grow then. I mean, that's the kind of conflict of interest is they're going to come in and tell you.
I have no idea what they're doing. I've always represented the point that I've always represented the idea that the person who built the grow or the person who was there from when it was a concrete slab and four walls and a ceiling, whoever was there during that build out is the only one that actually really knows the intricacies of what's going on, because there is a ton of science in the building of a cannabis production facility. In the 90s, it was very simple. Lights, some tables, some nutrients, you feed them, it's done. You deal with the effects of what's going on. Into the 2000s, you're dealing with rooms that are clean with drainage and some tables and yada yada. Now we're at the point in technology where the grow rooms that I build and design, that I have ready to go essentially out for my jump teams who know how to build them. Mm-hmm. They're hermetically sealed. I mean, down to, positive and negative air pressure in the room, using UVC, UVB lighting for pest management control, which is totally dangerous for people to be in. So my grows go from everything from your outdoor grow to your quite literally mechanical or totally autonomous or full or semi-autonomous grows, where somebody needs to go in once a week, take care of the plants, diagnose any sort of toxicities or deficiencies, if there's any pests or bugs, which there shouldn't be because it's totally hermetically
sealed. Yeah.
And then they're modular as well. So if you have an infection, you can dump that one room and you still haven't lost. You might get a week behind, but you're not going to get 3 months behind.
Yeah, so you're actually containing the issues through structure and through process.
That's 100% the only way to succeed is to. So what you have is, going back to some of the licensing procedures and big grows coming on board, is they'll make a facility look. If they put in their application, we will have a lab grade containment chamber between the locker rooms and the grow area. In the locker rooms, they're going to put on Tyvek suits. They're going to go and they're going to go into the grow area. They're going to get sprayed down by a mist. They're going to get UVC, UVB, or whatever it is with the suits on, eyes closed, step into some sort of a solution like a water bath, and then be able to go into the grow. What you have is companies building something that looks like that, but it isn't actually that. It's smoke and mirrors. And then even more so, they'll go into the grows. I mean, I've gone into grows that look like a multi-million-dollar grow. They don't have drains in the floor. So you're making a ton of work for the growers on the ground to be able to have to empty out these tables and do these different things with nutrients, when it can all be done through plumbing and autonomous, flow systems like ebb and flow or whatever it is. Yeah. They make nutrient dosing systems now. They make full, nutrition and pest management control systems now, and those run in the $100,000 to $250,000 range. And when you have when you're speccing out a grow, what I've found in the last 6 months is that we'll spec out a grow and we'll be contending with another grow operation or another cannabis consulting company. My grows are going to be more expensive. I don't want to be involved with anybody that doesn't want to spend the money to do it right the first time. So I have a bunch of other businesses that I'm involved in, ancillary to cannabis, manufacturing, for the vaporization industry, which I think is the best way to make cannabinoids bioavailable. Mm-hmm. All sorts of stuff. I mean, we could, like I said, I think on our first call, we could spend 3 hours talking about cannabis.
I mean, I'd be curious to talk a little bit more about the funding side of it. So I get that from a technical point of view, we now have, kind of state of the art grow facilities, which really sound like clean rooms for producing, silicon chips, where it's incredibly isolated or incredibly controlled environments, at minimal human interaction to avoid human error as possible, but they're expensive. I mean, we're talking, serious money that needs to get put down to be able to fund not only the licensing, but the construction and the management of this stuff. So how do you, from an organizational entity finance structure, actually make this stuff work now to pull that money together?
These questions are literally things that I deal with every day. So it's pretty interesting. So there's 3 different kind of caveats where I come in. So there's the grows that have done it wrong or cheaply in the beginning, and they need it fixed, and that requires a CapEx investment. And that's not something that the board is happy to hear about. And quite literally, they have to wait for their money to grow on cannabis, which is not something that private equity people are used to. They're used to knowing, exact top line metrics. They're used to exact numbers and that don't change or change within just a varying degree. Whereas in growing, if it's summertime in Massachusetts and you don't have your rooms perfect, you're going to see a heat spike or a humidity spike, and you're going to, one person walks in with one spore on them and you can contaminate an entire grow. So yeah, it's treated like a total clean room. So where private equity money comes in is where it's interesting, and more so than anything. Now your question was, how does it integrate with the development with the grows, or how does it actually look like when it's up and running? Because there's two different.
I'd be interested in both.
Okay, so for example, and listen, I don't consider myself the best in the industry. I consider myself to have one of the best aesthetics in the industry. So there's people that can come in, they can offer you a solution, and it's going to work, and you're going to make money. But at some point, you're going to run into a problem, and they're going to say, "Oh, it's climate related," or it's going to be, somebody brought in a bug and or like a spider mite or something like. June, July, August are spider mite seasons. If you walk by a hedge outside, most likely there's spider mites in it. If you get it on your sleeve and then you go into there, and like I said, it's tough to get a facility up and running. I mean, one of the facilities that I've built, has essentially 3 traps before the growers can go into the grow room. And it's access controlled. You go in, you have to shower when you go in. Then from that shower, you're going to take a towel that was sanitized by us, and male and female shower rooms, and then you're going to go into male and female locker rooms, which have been sanitized and have UVB, UVC lighting in them. That's making sure that everything that's on all the walls are completely destroyed. They're sanitized every 3 days with vital oxide, which is a surgery grade room cleaner, things like that. And this is some details, but if people are listening to this and they don't know what I'm talking about, they need to go back and redo their SOPs. Yeah. And only then, once you're wearing our uniform that's been cleaned on site and we know that it's clean, are you allowed anywhere near into the production side of the facility. And that's for kitchen, that's for extraction, that's for grow, wherever it is. And then on a caveat, if you're breeding, if you're doing genetics, that has to be a separate facility on site that they're never allowed to come into the grow until they're not breeding anymore. Because the last thing you want is a male sport. You want male contaminants in an all-female room. You lose the entire harvest.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about the money side of it. So it's extremely easy to get private equity excited about large-scale cannabis operations, keeping them interested. And when Jeff Sessions is releasing these news articles that he's going to shut down cannabis facilities, when he's scheduled CBD, what you have is a lot of people with cold feet right now. So they're really into it. They want to be involved. And we're not talking little raises. We're talking $5 to $10 million raises. Yep. We're doing a raise for Massachusetts right now. It's a $10 million raise, and we have letters of intent for 6 out of the 10. And once we get that 10, we can build the facility out and do what we need. But then there's staged investment after that. These are big investments that people need to understand. It's not. I get approached by people that say, "I have $250,000. I want to invest in cannabis," and I said,
"Go find 10 friends."
Our lowest investment is $1 million. And they go, $1 million? It's like, we want to mitigate the amount.
I mean, it's like real estate investment. I mean, you're talking about serious construction and serious development to really get these things up and running.
Yeah. So here's where the problem happens. You get the money, right? Let's say you get the 10 million. Let's say that 10 million is $1 million for each representative of raising that $1 million. And you have 10 board members or whatever it is, 11, 12 board members, whatever it is. You have them arguing about, the grower comes in and says, "We have a problem with this. We need to make sure we get one of our dehumidifiers goes down." This is just like ops every day. One of our dehumidifiers, we have to air in a dehumidifier tomorrow. What's that going to, the board? What's that going to cost? All right, well, the dehumidifier, one of them went down. It's $5,000. We should get a second one in case this happens again. That's $10,000. And to air it in overnight is another $2,500 because they weigh about 1,000 pounds. So then they're talking about a 17.5. I keep talking in millions. $17,500 for something that's needed to keep that grow. And they're debating, now I'm talking about the private equity people sitting on the board, are debating whether or not that needs to happen. And the grower's telling them, if you don't do this, we're going to lose the crop. And then they sit and they wait, and 5 days later, okay, let's do it. Well, 5 days have now gone by. The plant's been stressed. You bring in that thing, you're going to have something wrong. And then they're like, well, what happened? We got you what you needed. Well, it's not, you didn't get it to me the next day. You got it to me 5 days later. Plants have already suffered. There's irreparable damage. And little things like 5% humidity up and down can cause big problems. Little things like temperature up and down 5 degrees can cause huge problems, even if it's for a day. So, and there's no shutting it down. Once you turn the machine on, it has to go until harvest.
Yeah, you're on a train at that point.
So yeah, you have a lot of distrust in private equity. I mean, I can't tell you how many private equity hedge fund groups, things like that I've dealt with that are really interested and actually get on the ground. And then they implode themselves because they don't understand the capital investment that they need to make as the growth keeps going. So what I offer with Gold Syndicate is a very clear picture based on the lowest numbers possible to investors. And I say, listen, all my numbers are calculated on worst day doomsday scenarios. So short of losing the entire harvest, yields, if I can do 3 pounds a light or 2.5 pounds a light, I cut that in half, and that's my yield projection on the pro forma. So what you have is a lot of companies out there that are representing themselves. I just looked at a deck from a company that's bloating them by like 300%, bloating all their returns, and then they're not taking into account what's going to extraction, because the big business these days is in extraction. Yeah. Granted, the market nationally is still about 40% flour, but it's surpassed by your pens, your cartridges, your concentrates for dabbing, your sublinguals, your topicals, things like that. And I only project that it's going to go in that direction even more. So maybe 5 years from now, it's going to be 20% flour, 80% extractables.
Yeah. So what happens in the extractable? So you said that the problem is they haven't even accounted for the extractable.
Well, I mean, that's just in some cases. I mean, like, for example, let's say a grow, let's just use round numbers. Let's say a grow on the harvest is going to do 100 pounds, which is not a lot.
Yeah.
Let's say it's strain specific and you're going to do 25 pounds of that let's say it's a Girl Scout cookie strain. You're going to do 25 pounds. That's going to be allocated for extraction nug run. So that's what we call it for live resin, which is the highest quality, highest possible cannabinoid content you can do. Your yields on that are going to be extremely low. But what they're doing is they're not, or let's say it's what a lot of people do is they do the trim. So in states like New York, where, and things might have changed, but the last I checked, they're only doing extractables, no flour.
Yeah.
What they're probably doing is distillate, which is it's distillation of cannabinoids. But there's a loss factor. So you might only get on flour to crude oil, you'll get like a 50% yield. Then on that 50% yield, you're going to yield another 30 or 40%, if you're lucky on.
Got it.
So then it's how many times you're washing that distillate to get it as clear as possible. There's some companies out west that are doing 6-wash clear distillate. It's literally as clear as water, and it's the most purest form of THC you could possibly get. Those are what's going in the pens. That's what's going in for food. There's all different methods of extraction. Volatile, meaning they're using solvents like butane, hexane, pentane, which are scary words. But if you're running a proper lab, all of that is purged out completely, and it's used to it's a way better
purely extraction device. Yeah.
And if you look at any extractions in pharma, they're doing way crazier things than using solvents. So the states that are allowing volatile extractions are the states that are on track to doing it correct, like California, like Colorado. It's very important in the structure. In states like New Jersey, to get a lab up and running, it has to be OSHA compliant. It's a huge capital investment. In states like CT, it has to be run through no solventless, so like a water CO2 extractor, which is a $150,000 to $200,000 machine. And then you can use ethanol in the winterization process and things like that. We're getting a little too scientific, but the point is that they contradict themselves. So the laws contradict what is actually implemented. And that's because of a very big topic that not a lot of people know about, which is the states are using your applications. So they'll release a guidance and they'll say, these are our guidances for the application process of state X, right? People will then, in droves, apply and use best practices, to which they'll most of the time get some sort of a doctorate in horticulture or a PhD or whatever it is to write those, and they'll win. But then they're going to be held to those best practices. And that's where it becomes a big problem for production, for getting medicine to the people. I mean, I can't tell you how many facilities failed microbial on 0.001 when the apple that you're biting into that says USDA organic, GMO free, yada, 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 you think it's the best thing in the world you're putting into your body. If that went to the same standard, which is a pharma standard for the cannabis, you wouldn't see apples anymore.
Yeah. So it's a whole different set of.
Yeah. So pesticides need to be reevaluated in some states. It needs to be used. They're using it in ComAg and in organic ComAg, everything. So you can't hold a botanical product to a pharma standard from that thing. And that's where a lot of states are failing. And I think you're seeing a lot of the laws loosen up a little bit.
Yeah.
With private equity money, the biggest problem, and I'll end this topic on this. Once the operation is greenlit, built, and ready to go, there's no seat at the board for ops. So and that's how it's been for the future. They're making all these business decisions that are affecting ops on the day-to-day ground floor. And they don't know that then ops doesn't know what's going on. So they're continuing, they're doing their regimens, they're doing what they have to do. And then some suit will come in that says that they're a director of cultivation or whatever it is. And they'll say, oh, well, we're going to change it up and we're going to do this. Oh, but we're mid-grow. Why would we do that mid-grow? Doesn't matter. It's what the board wants. We're doing it. And then the board yells at them when the crop isn't successful. So it's a double-edged sword. Money is a double-edged sword. So I will not involve myself in any grow operation, either consulting or actual implementation at a grow facility, unless my team, an extractor, a grower, myself, and one other, have board seats on, and we can make decisions where we have final veto power over everything. So unless it's spending money, if it's a decision on the ground floor, like what nutrient are we going to use or what CO2 level are we going to put in the rooms and all that, that's the ops team side. And the board of directors and private equity money that is involved, that has maybe read some things on YouTube or read some High Times articles, tips on how to grow. You're not a cannabis grower. You're the money. Yeah. I know it's cool. I know it's cannabis and but you cannot by any means.
And it makes sense. I mean, I think that, very similar to, anything that's kind of heavy R&D, research and development kind of things, where you really need to separate out sort of the science from the management and and those things, and making sure that you've got the right people making those decisions. Because the fact is, it's complicated. It takes a lot of experience. It takes a lot of knowledge and understanding to be able to make those decisions. And if you're just a investor, board member, private equity person, it's going to be tough for you to really make those well. So tell me a little bit more about what you're doing in terms of putting together the funds that you're putting together. How are you structuring them? We're kind of coming to the end here on time, but if people had more questions or interested in talking to you more about it or getting involved, how would they reach you and connect with you?
Sure. I mean, obviously, if you want to touch base on this, there's so much that I can talk on, and we barely scratched the surface. But my cannabis venture is Gold Syndicate, and what I'm doing is, at this point, I am investing all of my time into developing these new set of SOPs, these new set of IPMs, and structuring teams, pretty much 4 teams across the country, 1 on the East Coast, 1 in the middle, and 2 on the West Coast, that can jump and go anywhere within a day or two to be able to either fix a cannabis problem or to be able to plan to implement a cannabis facility. And then what I call embedding, which is, if the team wants to have it so that the team I put in place comes online and they want to keep them as kind of like your head grower, your head of extraction, your facilities manager, things like that. Fine, you can keep my team, but now I have points in your company. I have a seat on the board, and and any money that I bring so that's the upside. If I'm bringing money and my private equity side, so I represent about 50 to 75 million in private equity money that people that want to be in cannabis, but they're not sure where they want to be, if now's the right time, what do I get involved in? And right now, to be honest with you, Bruce, I'm steering most of them towards ancillary to cannabis. So all the products that are coming out, whether it be a nutrient company, whether it be a soil company, whether it be a dab rig company, whether it be a vaporization company, whatever it is that's ancillary to cannabis where regulations don't apply, that's the key. So for now, and then when states start to release guidances again, like Mass is a big state that's going to go off, and so is New Jersey apparently. So Mass is the one that I'm ultra focused on because I like the way their med is set up. I like the way their rec's set up. Now we're waiting on guidances to see how the rec and facilities need to get built. Haven't been released yet. When they get released is when we'll mobilize to do the application and get things funded. And we'll be doing a vertically integrated there, which is essentially a grandfathered license from somebody. And we're going to partner with them. And we're going to make sure we get, a facility up and running that returns to our investors very fast, but keeps their involvement in the ops side of the business to a minimum. It's very important. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for failure because they're going to get involved. Everything's going to get deadlocked. And if you have cannabis people who are doing their job and that know what they're doing, which is not the case in a lot of these big grows, these are basement growers that are coming into a ComAg setting and they have known nothing about logging analytical data or using a back-end system or things like that. It's all failure from there on. You need to have educated medical rec teams that know what they're doing. Otherwise, don't do it. So, my team's Gold Syndicate, if you haven't heard about us, we're doing our job correctly.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going for the high-end boutique. We don't have a website. We don't have a LinkedIn. We don't have anything. And that's because let the other people that don't know what they're doing fail and weed themselves out. And when we're ready, we'll launch our name. But we have enough business, word of mouth, via Wall Street and the industry that we can be ghosts. We don't need to be. And that's not for any sort of legal reasons or anything. We're operating 100% above the board. It's just that unless you can kind of get in touch with people that can put you in touch with the right people, you shouldn't be in cannabis in the first place.
Yeah.
I think that's a filter. I think that's a good, you shouldn't be in cannabis in the first place. Right there is the cut, man. You shouldn't be there if you don't know what you're doing.
Brendan, this was great. I really appreciate the time. I appreciate the conversation. I like you said, there's probably another 6 hours of content we did go through. Thank you.
Hey, whatever you need, buddy.
You've been listening to Thinking Outside the Bud with business coach Bruce Eckfeldt. To find a full list of podcast episodes, download the tools and worksheets, and access other great content, visit the website at thinkingoutsidethebud.com. And don't forget to sign up for the free newsletter at thinkingoutsidethebud.com/newsletter.